Hello, and welcome to another episode of FAHCademics Podcast. My name is Rich Tolentino, a student at UC Davis, and in this podcast, we aim to provide you with accessible peer mentorship and advice to help you navigate through your college journey. Today, I am joined with Rafael Ricon, also a student at UC Davis, and he's here to share with us his experience and some of his advice about being a freshman in college. Hey, Rafael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Ritz. I'm Raf. Just a few things about me. I am a UC Davis student, second year global disease biology major, currently on the pre-med track. I'm also the FAC representative. So I represent the org at a bunch of events, and I also provide internship opportunities, job opportunities, or information about events or other opportunities to the community.
That's awesome. So, Raf, to start things off, could you please start by telling us how your overall freshman experience was?
Okay, I'm going to divide this into quarters
Yeah.
because honestly, each quarter was so distinct. Number one, by far the most enjoyable one was fall. Um,
Mhm.
Started off with a lot of welcome events, and that's when I really got my college social life kicked off. I met my four best college friends at a film event, and from there it kind of snowballed as I kept meeting new people, get kept getting involved more with the organizations that I thought I would like to be involved in the future. I got used to the college workload, and it was just a
Yeah.
normal-ish college quarter.
Yeah.
Nothing too heavy, just kind of transitioning into this new academic life and personal life and logistical life at the dorms. Second was winter quarter, and from there, in fall quarter, I took 14 units, which is not a lot, and it's in
Mhm.
fact below the average quarterly unit count if I want to graduate within 4 years.
Mhm.
So I upped it to 17 in winter quarter, which is a lot more work. Unfortunately, also that some of the teachers were a bit less forgiving
Yeah.
during my second quarter. Had to work a bit harder, especially in my STEM courses. Winter quarter was a bit more dreary. Just the mood all around was a bit more hard work, less play.
Mhm.
It was definitely not as upbeat as fall quarter, a bit tougher, but in terms of massive changes, there were a lot less
Mhm.
because you kind of get used to the situation already. Then, from out of nowhere, a global pandemic hit, and we kind of roll into ooh, spring quarter, in which everything changed. A lot
Yeah.
of people went back home. I know a lot of us are, but so a lot of us are also in our college cities. Some of us even in the dorms. So living situations change. Virtual learning was a thing. We had to get used to that and kind of coping both academically and personally.
Mhm.
And throughout all those quarters and going into the summer, there was really a big theme of massive change.
Mhm.
Unexpected, definitely,
Yeah.
but every part of my life was changed and then changed again and then changed the third time, especially when the pandemic hit, but especially having to readjust constantly to new living
Yeah.
situations and academic situations.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of resonate with what you said. We're both second years now, and I also went through the same experience as you did. And, for the most part, before the pandemic, you were kind of having the typical, I would say, freshman year experience, trying to readjust with college life and going through all those ups and downs that we all know. So I know you talked about, some of the biggest challenges and also about the pandemic that, struck us during the winter. But can you talk more specifically about the biggest challenges that freshmen go through in their first year of college that may not be about the pandemic, or maybe in UC Davis in particular?
The big thing I can say is it's a lot of adjustment
Mhm.
because college is so much different than high school, especially if you're not living with your parents anymore. No matter where you're living, no matter what your situation is, pre pandemic, post pandemic, during the pandemic, you will have to readjust to how college education works. It's a lot less structured. You're not in school 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's a lecture here, a discussion there, a lab
Mhm.
there. And you're definitely not in class required to be there for as much time,
Yeah.
but it's also a bit more independent. And while it might seem relaxed on paper, because obviously you don't have as many hours being put into attendance, you have a lot more free time,
Mhm.
it's also a lot more independent. And if you do not use that independence wisely, then you quickly find out that you are not going to be able to succeed, especially if your college and high school experiences were not very congruent.
Mhm.
The amount of effort that you were able to put into high school and kind of get away with it definitely is not the same as college. And that's only the academic side.
Yeah.
When you go in person, which for now a lot of people are predicting that fall quarter everything turns to normal next year. So when I moved to the dorms, I had to deal with the fact that my family wasn't necessarily there. All the old friends I had weren't necessarily there. I had to readjust everything from where I got my food and the timing of my meals because eat when you can, obviously eat as much as you can because it keeps you happy, it keeps you healthy. Everything down to haircuts or toothpaste, I had to really make sure I was kind of keeping my life together in small ways, in ways that I had not done previously.
Mhm.
And specific to my experiences, there were so many opportunities that I was kind of flooded with. But at the same time, there were so many opportunities I had no idea about unless I reached out to the right people. And as I mentioned, there's so much more free time and independence in
Mhm.
college. So you kind of have to allocate your time productively, not just to schoolwork and taking care of yourself, which are obviously very important.
Mhm.
But when you have the capacity to, you have to decide where you're going to spend this time in terms of furthering your career and personal growth.
Mhm.
And there, you have to sift through all this information coming at you, try to get even more information that could potentially be even more valuable that you don't know even exists.
Mhm.
And then you have to start kind of spreading yourself around. I got accepted into a clinical research internship, and I kind of had to fit that into my schedule along with club board position and a few more obligations. So progressively increasing your workload in and out of school is a big one.
Yeah. No, I love how you mentioned independence because I think a lot of high schoolers who just come out of high school have this idea that, with independence, they're able to work better and they're able to work with whatever time fits best for them. But I think coming into college, as you may have realized, just as I did, independence comes with a lot of responsibility and you kind of have all this free time to do everything that you want to do, but at the same time trying to balance the personal and academic workload is challenging because you have to make decisions for yourself, which is kind of interesting because when I was a high schooler, probably as you have viewed it too, like independence was one of the main things that I went to college for. I was like, I'm so done with this structure that high school put on us and living with our parents, as much as I hate to say it, is kind of restraining in some ways.
Yeah, gaining independence is a very big double-edged sword.
Hmm.
And it's one of the biggest adjustments that you have to make. Using that time wisely really determines a lot about how your college experience will go. Because if you kind of waste it, and not that like social time is wasting it, but not putting enough time into the things that are going to really contribute to your future, not putting time into learning about those opportunities and making the best of them, or getting involved in investments of time and energy that will pay off later. And obviously dedicating enough time to keeping your academics afloat because there's not that structure or on paper motivation necessarily
Hmm.
to force you to do it. If you don't do it, it's going to be really difficult. But if you master that skill, and sooner the better, then you're really setting yourself up with a good foundation for the quarters and years to come because you have kind of planted those seeds both in your work ethic and in your experiences. You're kind of getting the snowball built.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And can you talk more about specifically how did you overcome the challenges that you have mentioned in your freshman year?
Living situations, let's tackle that first because I didn't have that's probably what affected me least. So I dormed for two of my first 3 quarters, and that was a very pleasant experience for me. Having to adjust to not having, the immediate comforts of what I had been used to for 7 years actually was jarring.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm the type of person who kind of makes those adjustments pretty quickly. Although I do know there are many people who do not. And taking a slow start and kind of really feeling their new environment out was very beneficial for them. Kind of finding secure footholds, so to speak, in this new terrain where they knew they could resort back to this resource, this group of people, this activity. Building these habits or building these footholds will really give you places to return to and to rely on. For the independence one, it kind of just took a slap in the face, honestly. That's how a lot of people start off their college experiences. And while it's definitely not something to because it's a big adjustment, it really is the wake up call where you're like, hey, you got to take this seriously. But the biggest thing is time allocation. After you got the motivation down, you have to figure out, oh my gosh, where am I going to get all this time? I only have 24 hours in a day. What am I going to do? I
Yeah.
only have 168 hours in a week. And on a day-to-day basis, where do I put this? So I had to balance between eating uh,
Oh yeah.
my mandatory lectures, and I got to be honest, I skipped so many of them. Not the mandatory ones, but I
Yes.
skipped so many. Oh boy. Um, then I was training for club track at the time, so I had to factor that in. Various club meetings scattered throughout the place that I wanted to attend. Then I had to plug in my academics. And for a lot of that, it's a lot of self-studying, especially for chemistry. I would study like 2, 3 hours a day before, for like a few days before each midterm, which was a bit overkill. But if you are the student who needs to do that, or if you have a lot of class obligations or a job or something in which you really have to be wise about your time, you really have to get used to seeing kind of the free slots in your days and then being wise in knowing yourself, how much of that time you're able to dedicate, and then actually following through on that because it's hard sometimes. You really have to commit to that time you set aside to make sure all of your obligations are covered.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned, as college students, we have to know ourselves really well because there's a lot of opportunities that are available in college and that you just want to latch onto everyone. And sometimes we don't realize that, if we spread ourselves out too thin, we don't find time to practice self-care and be productive at every activity or opportunity or subject that we enrolled for. Now, you also mentioned that you wanted to go to medical school and that you're a pre-med student. Are there specific challenges that first year pre-meds have when they're in college?
I gotta say the biggest one, I've mentioned this a few times before, is access to information. A lot of people start off in college with different levels of knowledge about the extracurricular opportunities and experiences that are available to them. Some people are already writing papers, getting into labs. Like that's rare. They're definitely the minority, but there are people who are just boom right from the get-go doing all that stuff. And then there are people like me where we're not really like it's not that we're not capable or that we're not aware, but we may not be as explicitly informed of the many opportunities that we have. Like I walked into Davis and I was like, hey, this place has clinics run by the med students and there's research. And I had very rough ideas, but I didn't know how to take advantage of these opportunities, nor did I know about all the other opportunities through clubs and other student organizations that I could use to further my career path. And a lot of this, by the way, isn't just specific to pre-med. This is very applicable to a lot of pre-health or any profession that goes to another education level after undergrad. Almost every career in general, really. For students like me, it was a battle of I don't know what this is, but I know that I have to do things like this. So I need to find
Yeah.
out what exactly I can do to build my experiences, build my skill set. It turns out there were so many organizations like MRAP, which is like the emergency medicine research. I pretty much asked everyone I can ask. I talked to everyone. I have this close high school friend who goes to Davis a year above me. He was like, "Hey, I'm in this lab. I'm in this lab. I did this summer thing. Super cool." I was like, "Oh my gosh, can you tell me more? Can you tell me how you did it?" And I took notes and I tried to do it myself. It didn't work out, but at least I tried. And then I also talked to advisors, peer advisors, advising team of your major. If you can reach them, it's so helpful because they're in touch with their departments and so many of the opportunities around campus and outside of campus. And that's how I was able to get my internship, actually, because I was on a mailing list. Just be attentive and be proactive and ask everyone you can access. These opportunities are really crucial, but a challenge that a lot of us face is we don't know that they exist. So put yourself out there.
I definitely agree with you. I remember my first year, because I'm a pre-med as well. There were so many opportunities that I knew existed, but I didn't know how I could go about getting into these opportunities and taking advantage of them. I think, like you said, going to advising, especially UC Davis has an amazing advising team, the health profession advising, and even the college advisors, as you said, are really great resources. And the mailing list, I know a lot of the jobs, a lot of internships, and even the classes that I'm in right now have been part of my schedule because of the mailing list, because of how they sparked my interest. Just being attentive and, like you said, being proactive, I think, is really important.
Yeah, my advice would be just anywhere you think you get information, put a foot in the door. If there's a mailing list, sign up for it. I went to the FAHC first year Aggie Connection for research held by my major's peer advisors, and that got me a lot of potential opportunities. Just pay attention to everything from mailing lists to like Facebook, especially if your friends are like, "Hey, I'm going to this event. It's a health conference." Absolutely investigate those
Yes.
Hail Mary connections and like, oh my gosh, if that's something that you like to do, out of nowhere, it popped up in your timeline, even though there was no way you'd have known about it without checking on your friend. Go do it. Just check everywhere that you can.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely expanding your network, be friends with as many people as you can, because you never know where they can point you to. We talked a lot about challenges and how you were able to overcome them and some advice. What is one regret that you have about your freshman year, and why?
I regret that I didn't spend all my Aggie cash. I had to forfeit all of it when I canceled my housing contract, which was a tragedy. I had hundreds on there. No, but not doing enough in some areas and doing too much in others. Winter quarter, I was super academic focused and it paid off. I had a perfect GPA, but it felt me really burn out. It left me really burn out, number one. And that's a sensation that you really don't want to have. It's really crippling in ways. Number two, yes, it yields pretty numbers. And, as a pre-med, I can't complain. I like those fours,
Yes.
but at the same time, it didn't lend me any sense of fulfillment or happiness. Like it lent me so much accomplishment and pride. And it's kind of it's a very good foundation for my future endeavors.
Mhm.
Like there was no, yes, I made it kind of sensation. Whereas when I attended the health conference that FAHC hosted, that's when I got that sense of fulfillment and belonging and wonder and happiness. And I mean, yeah, shameless plug, but the thing is, I poured so much of myself into academics. And while I will not regret it in terms of my future pursuits, it didn't make me happy per se. Whereas there were a lot of other pursuits, such as if I spent more time at the FAHC volunteer meetings, or if I engaged more with other clubs, just putting myself out there instead of hyper focusing on school. I have no doubt that I would have gotten a much more fulfilling and well-rounded experience. Academics are not the entire world. They're very important, but let's separate into like a personal well-being and a numbers game slash applications thing. Numbers game slash applications, I could have probably gotten away with studying a bit less.
Mhm.
And those experiences, while I'm a freshman, it's not going to like make or break the bank, are still good investments that'll not only bring me happiness, but also open myself up to other opportunities in the future that I can add to my resume that could be a lot more valuable than those fours. on my GPA. And as a personal health thing, of course you want to do less studying and more social interaction in a very productive way. Duh. And don't be afraid to do that. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say risk your grades, but try to shave off some time from studying if you can to allocate to other activities. Kind of do the bare minimum needed to get a high grade. But once you know what you have to do towards that, don't put any more than you have to unless you're really scared. And then get to other stuff that's also productive, or at least take care of yourself at that time.
I have to say, I wish I could have used my Aggie cash too. I think most of my Aggie cash was spent seeking friends into the Tercero dining hall. Like, especially my sister, she used to come to the dorms a lot, and I would usually sneak her in, just use my Aggie cash. But, I think one of the biggest takeaways from what you just said was that it is possible to have that balance between academics and personal well-being. It's all about, I think, setting your priorities and definitely managing your time and knowing where to allocate your resources and your energy. Now, what is one thing, we talked about regret, but what is one thing that you are grateful for in helping you get through your first year?
First was honestly exercising. And let's talk about exercising specifically and having a hobby as a whole. Number one, physical activity. I'm sure you've heard this lots, but it's just good for your brain. It's got that sweet dopamine release. And you do it at night, and it's kind of like your reward for the day. You do it at the beginning of the day, and you got all the dopamine running around, and you're just a bit more ready to tackle it on. Whenever you can fit it in, even if it's just 30 minutes jogging, it's really good for you. But overall, as a hobby, you need stress relief. You need something to pour yourself into, because pouring yourself into schoolwork like I did in my winter quarter, it's not going to yield good emotional or personal benefits beyond like academics and resume stuff. Whereas putting yourself into a project really feels fulfilling, rewarding, it's fun. You take care of yourself during that time. And also helped that I was working towards a specific goal. So it was still a productive investment in its own way, while still also being something that I didn't begrudge doing.
Mhm.
Second is the friends I met, especially they're like these really four good friends who I spent like nearly all my time with. And I didn't come to college looking for friends. Like I wasn't like, I'm gonna be the loner Batman. But at the same time, I wasn't like here for the party. I was just here to get my degree, get those fours, get to med school, and dip. But then they showed up. We clicked instantly, and we were a very good support network for each other, not just in terms of social support, emotional support, being there for each other, being there to hang out whenever. We ate so much at the dining commons late night. I think we annoyed a fair share of staff, but they were also a huge motivating force. It was a huge mutual motivating force. We studied together. We informed each other about class decisions, about our pre-med timelines, because a ton of us were, and a few of us still are pre-meds. And we even motivated each other to pursue internships, jobs, board positions. We all pulled each other up. And actually, I applied to FAHC because so many of them were like, just do it. You know, you'd be good for the job, and you don't lose anything if you lose. So I'm here a big part because of their motivation and encouragement. My family was a huge part of that as well. Supporting me from home, making sure that for at least the time being, my financial issues were less of a problem. And just being very supportive presences whenever they called, whenever I could interact with them, whenever I could go home, which was frequent sometimes and rarely others. I still knew I had a very strong support base that I could fall back on, especially in times of emergencies. Finally, it's remembering to take care of myself. No matter what your situation in life is, if you can spare time, energy, maybe even resources to taking care of yourself, that will go a long way in ensuring not only your success as a student in whatever capacity that you can achieve, but also that you'll make it there intact, which is the most important thing, because you can build a career, but if you're not there to enjoy it, what's the point?
Yeah, definitely. I think self-care is one of the biggest, tips for any college student, honestly, in any year that they are in. I think a lot of people forget that they have to put themselves first before anything else. And I think self-care is a really great way, to recharge and to take care of oneself. Now, you also mentioned that, you had really great support system, like your close friends in college and your family back home. How do you think people who may not be as fortunate as you, who couldn't find a support system from their friends or their family, go about building that support system in college?
Well, one of the first pieces of advice I got, which paid off in the end, was go to clubs.
Mm.
And these people are of the same interests of you, and hopefully they are of the same values and mindsets as you. And no matter the difference in personalities or external interests, as long as you can find common ground and you can like these people and they can like you, that's all you need to form the beginnings of a support system. Be friendly, reach out to people you're comfortable reaching out to, and a few people that you're not. I also had kind of a support system, but kind of like a resource and advising system in my peer advisors for the global disease biology major, where I could go to. They had a snack box, so you could just drop in and take a few fruit snacks, which I always did. But also, they were a constant source of encouragement and advice. If I had any questions, turn to them. If I had any needs or had to double check something, turn to them. So not just people in the same kind of hierarchy level as you, people above you can be a really good source of support and opportunities. And finally, if you really can't build that support system, which no judgment, because a lot of you guys have jobs, obligations that might prevent you from engaging in so many social interactions, do what you can, and that is enough. And if you cannot build as big of a support system as you'd like to, be your support system. You take care of yourself, you offer yourself that validation, you remind yourself to take care of yourself, to eat, to sleep, to take some time off. Because if there's no one else to do it, it's going to have to be you. And no matter what, someone's going to have to take care of you. And if it's yourself, which obviously it should be yourself, don't rely on your friends to like run your life. But if there's no one else, truly, if there's no one else, try to be enough for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's really good to believe that, we are our best advocates at the end of the day. No one else will be there for us as much as we should be for ourselves. And I think that's a really good reminder for everyone as they go through college. Now, to end things off, Raf, this has been a really great talk, but to our listeners and watchers, what do you think should be the key takeaways from our conversation?
I think the biggest theme about your first year in college is just change and adjustment, massive change, because nothing in your life is the same when you shove yourself into that environment. You're already changing by the time you get here. You're not even the same person you are as when you left the house like a few hours ago. You have to deal with that wisely and productively in a way in which you both take care of yourself, make sure you're setting yourself up for success in a healthy way, while at the same time building a foundation for your academic and extracurricular interests. Nothing is going to stay the same once you get there. It's how you accept the changes that don't come voluntarily, affect change yourself in a productive way, in a healthy way, both for you and for your future. And how you deal with all of the change, or this entire world changing around you, by having a good support system if you can, taking care of yourself, being wise about the time you spend in every single activity that you do, taking advantage of connections and making sure that you have good things to fill up your time, whether you're working or taking care of yourself. As a final add-on, I've been saying this throughout this short segment, everything changes. Be ready for the things you expected to change least, to change in the most drastic ways you thought. And while that might not be necessarily true for all of us, things that you thought would always be constant might never be. And it's up to you to take those to your advantage as much as you possibly can, to cope with them as well as you can, and ultimately set yourself up in the present and the future, accounting for those changes as best as possible.
And there you have it, everyone. Raf's advice for freshman students in college. Thank you so much, Raf, for joining me today and sharing your very wise and insightful advice to our first years watching. And thank you for those of you watching and listening. I hope that you found this very useful and very helpful in whatever year of college you are in. And with that, I'll see you in our next episode of FAHCademics Podcast. Till then.